Games. I've been playing games for a long damn time, probably since some of you were sitting around hanging out in your dad's sperm seats just waiting to leap out of the vehicle as soon as you could. And I always wonder to myself, will this be the year that I'm not interested in games? Will this be the year that I pack it all up and I go back to logging? For 2020, it doesn't look like it. Every year I find stuff to get excited for, and this next year is not only no different, there are some titles here that I've actually wanted for over a decade. We're going to talk about them. Sup, everybody? This is Karak with ACG, and today we're going to take a look at 10 games I'm excited for in 2020. And these aren't in order of giving a shitness or anything like that, just 10 games. These are also not the only 10 games, otherwise 2020 would be a pretty crappy year. But they're my 10, and I would like to know what you think. What are your 10? Put them in the comments, and if you get a chance, subscribe to the channel, maybe hit the notification button. Let's begin. First up, Werewolf the Apocalypse Earthblood. Now, this will surprise a lot of people. Vampire Bloodlines, the sister RPG, is this title. It's getting its own game. And the first time I heard of a werewolf title was back in the damned Dreamcast days, but nothing actually came of it. All these titles have a detailed and thematically overlapping fiction as well. And I have to say, as much as I love Bloodlines and the vampire world, I actually am more excited for Werewolf, or at least to explore that world. Werewolf has always spoken to me in a different way, looking to be a bit more of an action-adventure game. This is from Cyanide and published by Big Ben, where the vampires have their clans, the werewolves have their tribes, and are on opposing sides of this giant supernatural war. The game's going to be built on a large hub world. It's going to have tribes and, of course, trips to the spirit penumbra, which is one of the major elements of the role-playing game's fiction, are actually going to be possible here. Players are going to use various werewolf forms as disguises and gain powers as they go along. This is supposedly a huge part of the game, and because this is a more action-oriented title, I'm interested to see how that translates. We're going to see how all this comes together, supposedly in 2020. Hopefully, it sees the same success as Vampire Bloodlines 2. And that brings us to number 2, which is Spellbreak. I have to admit, I was not keen on the idea of this at first. You guys know me, I'm not a huge battle royale kind of lover, but this battle royale has spell casting, it's a combat game, and it's from Proletariat, who I can't really see if they've done anything else. It's starting to actually come together. Currently, it's heading into 1.2 closed beta. It's a Fortnite somewhat clone, and it takes the gameplay in fiction and puts a fantasy slant on it, but it cranks up the speed a bit, and it adds in some pretty huge maps. Not that Fortnite doesn't have its own huge maps. I'm not sure if the market can actually sustain another title of this kind, but I went into this not really interested, and by the time I actually saw the trailer, I went out of it thinking this is one of those titles I want to keep an eye on. It's out sometime in 2020 for the PS4. They say later for the PC and possibly other systems down the line. I like the idea of fantasy a little bit more than I do Fortnite, and I don't think a Battle Royale has really nailed it. There's a couple free-to-play ones and otherwise, but they've never really spoke to me. I like the action that I'm seeing in the trailers here, so I'm keeping my eye out for it. And that brings us to number 3, HalfLife Alex. The idea that I'm talking about a VR game as being one of the most looked forward to titles and having Half-Life in the name still shocks me as I'm speaking about it. You take control of Alex Vance and you take the fight back to the Combine in this title, and it is a true title. It's announced to be a full-length single-player game, and Valve's current flagship for VR in its own Index headset. Alex also seems to be just one of the top reasons to possibly get anything that has finger tracking in VR, though they were clear that it works on every headset, but the Index, that's built in. I don't know what to say, but the game must have hit some kind of overall feeling for everybody, because Index VR headsets led the charts on Steam sales for a couple days after that announcement, and the damn things are $999. They better be drivable at that cost. But we're looking at Half-Life Alex coming out in 2020, and I have to say what I saw looked interesting. I'm just keeping an eye out for it because I love the idea that we're getting larger and larger VR titles. Moving on from there, let's cover number 4. The next one is not VR, and thank God, because I'd puke my way through it, and that's Dying Light 2. This is 15 years after Dying Light 1, and it comes to us via Techland. Extrapolating on the fiction of the first title in Dying Light 2, the game is attempting to do something a bit different than the prior title did and make the fiction actually matter in the game world and what you do. choices you make are going to change the entire world. We've seen videos of this, both within the battling factions themselves, as well as the look and feel of the actual world. It's got a map that's 4 times larger than the original game, and it seems to have a number of social systems built in there to play, and a reworked movement and battle system. It looked much slicker. And I think we can agree on a couple things here. The first, man, let us turn head bob off. That shit was nauseating. The second is that we do see a lot of these systems coming into play that we saw in State of Decay, of all things, which is its social systems. And I like that. And despite State of Decay not doing incredibly well when it came to its performance, it sort of caught on. And I've actually talked to developers who were looking at it and saying, we sort of want some of those bits in our game. And with Dying Light 2, it feels like we're going to have some of that overlap, which is very cool. Number 5. And the next up is Ori and the Will of the Wisps, or Ori, whichever way you pronounce it. The inclusion to this title is probably as shocking as finding out I also like Space Harrier. I think everybody expected that. I adored the first game, and Will of the Wisps comes from the same devs and the same amazing composer who, Gareth, he has, if you haven't seen it, done an interview here on the channel, so you can check out that video. Will of the Wisps seems to add a bit of depth to the original game design that we didn't see. You got some characters to interact with, and from what I understand, return to as well. The developers have admitted that it's got a little bit more in connection with Metroid and Rayman farther along in their series than the prior ones, which I think means it'll still be a platformer, but we will have a little bit of that RPG rubbed off in there. And I don't mean stats or anything like that, but I mean sort of an interconnected story. I admit it feels like we have been waiting forever for this, but 2020 does seem to be the magic year. February 11th, in fact, if you believe what they've said. And that brings us Microsoft Flight Sim. Damn. It doesn't need an introduction. You could hate Valentine's Day and kids and cars and chocolate and sex and still get joy out of the trailers that this game has been running. Microsoft Flight Simulator is actually coming from Asobo Games this time. They were the excellent devs who made A Plague Tale. And if you're asking yourself what experience they can take from one of those games to the other, I couldn't tell you because I was just as surprised as you. But they've worked on a ton of titles. How many times have we all said the graphics look real in these games? I was saying that back in the day when I was playing Sega Saturn and Virtua Fighter 2. Well, Virtua Fighter 2 Remix, I should be honest. Maybe this time we are close, though. It's got closed beta testing right now, or alpha testing. You take airplanes, you fly all over the world. It utilizes an engine that takes real-world map data and somehow magically creates graphics from it. And those graphics look stunning. If that game delivers even 50% of what it looks to be attempting to, then I will just start calling 2020 the future, even if it's after the game's release. Speaking of the future, it's always weird to look into the future to the past and see something that's came before but coming again, which sounds a little dirty. But that brings us to Resident Evil 3, the remake. This is a remake from Capcom. It's fully overhauled. It's a title a lot like following in the steps of, say, Resident Evil 2's remake, which to me was one of the games of the year. One of the worst kept secrets of the year, though, is that Project Resistance, that multiplayer game we saw some videos of on YouTube and people were all talking about, is actually the multiplayer component for the title and fit in. I really don't know what it is about these Resident Evil remakes and just the prior title as well, 7. They're excellent to me. They feel better than the originals. And I played the originals. I didn't have issues with control because back there, and you just didn't know that tank controls sucked. You just played and you basically accepted whatever you got and were happy for it. When it comes to these remakes, I think Resident Evil 3 is probably the one most people expected. I am admitting right now, I'm hoping we hear about a Code Veronica remake at some point in the future. Number 7. And that'll bring us to the next timely game, which is actually Ghost of Tsushima, which was shown at the State of Play. This is from Sucker Punch. The game looks incredible. It's hard to know exactly what it is and if it hedges more on the side of Neo, let's say, in its sequel, also coming out in 2020, or if it'll be a bit more lenient, though we do know a great deal of it is based on stealth. It's also got side quests, more of an RPG system in place at times, and since it's made by Sucker Punch, I think we can all pretty much agree it's going to look incredible. Those guys know how to make a game engine sing. When it comes to these style of games, we do have it going up against Neo, so it'll be interesting to see how all that pans out. But I think especially we saw a little bit of this trailer today. We saw a little bit of what might have been in-game graphics. It'll be very cool to play another one of these titles. We've come off of Sekiro, we've got this, and then we've got Neo. Very cool time if you like those type of titles and if you like that style of gameplay. Number 8. Speaking of styles of gameplay, this next one I'm not even 100% sure what it's gonna play like, but it interests me, especially after I started talking to people about it. And this is Gods and Monsters, made by Ubisoft. It looks like Legend of Zelda fell into a vat of Olympic gods and then wrote its own storybook. What little we've actually seen looks incredible, and it's by the creators of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which to me personally is really interesting news, is that branching out and that way in which they handle the world's mindset and fiction makes me excited for them to try something outside of the Assassin's Creed brand. It looks like, though, it's trying to go head-to-head with Zelda, which I can say was not only not expected, does seem to be biting off a bit more than most companies want to chew. I'm still really excited for it. What I saw looks cool. I love the way the game's world overall looks. We'll just have to sort of see as it gets nearer to release, which again, they say is in 2020. Number 9. And that brings up another title that's sort of in flux. They do say 2020, so we're going to go with it, and that's Biomutant. I admit this is another one that wasn't on my list at first, especially because a lot of the trailers we saw looked really janky. But the more I look at this game, it's from THQ, the more I'm digging some of the ideas. It's an action role-playing game that looks like it's all parts of every animal-based Pixar and Disney film ever. You get to create your own mutated animals. It has a large number of battle systems at play. Wherever you are, you can also customize weapons, as well as when you level up, you can change the entire way your creature looks by mutating and adding parts of defeated enemies as you go. It also recently showed it has some kind of vehicles of some kind. Something about this game just attracts me. I love the animal life shit, and the Rats and Nim, again, one of my favorite movies of all time. Being able to live in those kinds of fictions always grabs my attention. The more we see of this, the more farther along it looks, and the more interested I am. It's also made by a development company called Experiment 101. Probably has the coolest name in gaming, so that's something as well. And that brings us to number 10. Lastly, we've got Evil Genius 2. I loved the original. I love getting my Dr. Evil on. Nothing's as enjoyable as playing the other side of the hero equation, and that's why Dungeon Keeper as well is so enjoyable. So I'm incredibly happy to see this be announced and show more and more as we get closer to release. Evil Genius, to me, once again allows you to control that evil organization bent on ruling the world, which basically means being Cobra against G.I. Joe. But it did it so well in the original. Here, you're going to be building your secret lair and basically working to get your own evil minions and spies up to snuff compared to the world's heroes. In Evil Genius 2, you actually have a full-blown story for different characters that you can choose. You can choose a couple. I think they said 4 evil geniuses with different enemies or at least plots and maybe powers and abilities. All the while you're watching out and keeping your base safe from the good guys in the game. And I really enjoy that mirror side gameplay style. We always get to see that one good guy go in and sneak around and kill every one of the bad guys and get out without being harmed. Here, we're going to see the exact opposite. Good guy comes in and you fucking gutter mulch him. And I love that idea. And my evil plan to do 10 videos has been completed. I think it was 10. It was 9 or 10. We'll see when the numbers pop up. So I want to know what you guys think. That is my 10. I believe it's 10. We'll stick with 10. I'd love to know what you guys think of this. And, I'll try to do these as much as I can in the future. If you guys get a chance, make sure to always check out the podcast. It's at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Twitch, ACG on Twitch. Also, the VODs are there for 6 months, so it is like YouTube. The videos will be there for a long time. But you can go there, and any games that I can't play and do a video for patrons only that I do, like the couch discussions, they're talked about every single week. We do early impressions, many times exclusive impressions, so I'd love for you to check that out. Here, of course, you can expect video game reviews. You can expect more of the behind-the-scenes videos. You can expect more why videos. It's going to be a very busy year. You can expect some changes as well. Nothing big, nothing being removed, everything just being added to what we already get. And speaking of adding, why don't you come and add yourself to the coolest Discord in the world and the coolest patron? Come on by on Patreon. It's ACG or Angry Centaur Gaming on Patreon. The link will be there. I would love to have you come on by and join what is an amazing group talking about amazing things. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.